11 seconds. That is how long it took a 69-year-old woman in Grand Rapids, Michigan, to stand up from her own kitchen chair last spring. 4 years earlier, she got up without thinking about it. Her family watched that 11-second struggle and used the word everyone uses: aging. Her doctor used a more clinical word: sarcopenia, the gradual age-related loss of muscle tissue. A 2024 review in the journal Nutrients puts sarcopenia at roughly 10% of adults aged 60 and above, so the label was reasonable. It was also, in her case, incomplete. Because a meaningful slice of what gets filed under muscle loss after 60 is not primarily a muscle problem at all. It is a chemistry problem. A 2008 review in Molecular Aspects of Medicine laid it out plainly. Vitamin D deficiency can produce an actual myopathy, a genuine weakness of muscle. And the same review describes vitamin D status tracking positively with muscle strength. Weak muscle from missing vitamin D can look, walk, and struggle almost exactly like weak muscle from age. One of those is largely a one-way street. The other is frequently correctable. And here is the part that should concern you. The two conditions get told apart by details that a 9-minute appointment rarely has time to check. Today I'm going to give you the answer up front, the way I always try to. If you are over 60 and getting weaker, the question is not only how much muscle have I lost, it is why. And vitamin D deficiency belongs on that list of whys before anyone accepts the word irreversible. There is one specific pattern in how the weakness shows up, one clue in which movements fail first that points toward the correctable version, and almost nobody outside a specialty clinic knows to look for it. I will show you that clue later in this video because it is exactly the detail this woman's family missed for 4 years. Here is exactly what you are getting in the next 20 minutes. First, a 3-part assessment you can do at home this week at your own kitchen table and in your own hallway using a chair, a jar, and a clock that gives you an honest read on where your muscle strength actually stands. Second, the mechanism. In plain language, how vitamin D speaks directly to your muscle fibers and what goes quiet inside those fibers when the vitamin is missing. Third, that clue I mentioned, the specific pattern of weakness that separates a vitamin D myopathy from true age-related sarcopenia, so you can bring your doctor an observation instead of a vague complaint. Fourth, what the research actually shows about fixing it, including a 2023 meta-analysis in Nutrients that tested a specific combination of protein, leucine, and vitamin D in people who already had sarcopenia. And fifth, the single mistake that converts a fully recoverable weakness into a permanent loss of independence. I see this mistake described over and over in the fall and frailty literature, and it is the one I most want you to leave this video without. If you are new here, this channel is Dr. Vitalis, and the job here is simple. I read the clinical research on aging, the journals and consensus statements your appointment never has time for, and I translate it into things you can actually check and actually ask. No panic, no miracle products, just the evidence, in plain English, for adults who are past 60 and intend to stay on their feet. Now let me tell you about the woman in Grand Rapids, because her story is the pattern. I will call her Margaret. She is a composite of cases described across the clinical literature, but every beat of her story is the typical beat. At 65, Margaret gardened 3 mornings a week. She carried her own groceries up 4 porch steps. She drove to her granddaughter's swim meets in Lansing an hour each way. The first change was small. In the fall of that year, she started setting the heavy watering can down halfway across the yard. The second change came the next spring. Opening a new jar of pasta sauce took 2 tries, then a rubber grip pad, then her son-in-law. By 67, she was pushing off the armrests with both hands to get out of her recliner. By 68, she had quietly stopped taking the stairs at church and started using the side entrance with the ramp. Nobody chose any of this. It arrived one small surrender at a time. Her checkup at 68 was, on paper, fine. Blood pressure acceptable. Cholesterol acceptable. When she mentioned feeling weaker, she got the answer millions of older adults get. That happens at your age. Stay active. The word sarcopenia appeared in her chart the following year, after her daughter insisted the 11-second chair struggle was not normal. And a sarcopenia label was defensible. The European Working Group on Sarcopenia in Older People published a formal consensus definition of the condition back in 2010 in the journal Age and Aging. And by their kind of framework, low strength and slow movement, Margaret qualified. What nobody had ordered in 4 years of visits was a simple blood test for vitamin D. When it finally happened, her level came back deeply low. And this is where I want you to lean in. Deficient vitamin D does not just make bones fragile. Per that 2008 review in Molecular Aspects of Medicine, deficiency can produce a true myopathy, real muscular weakness with a real biochemical cause. Margaret had spent 4 Michigan winters mostly indoors, eating less than she used to, her aging skin making less vitamin D from what little sun she got. Some portion of her decline, no one can say precisely how much, was never irreversible aging. It was a correctable deficiency wearing Sarcopenia's face. And the reason I am telling you Margaret's story is not that she is unusual. It is that she is exactly typical. A northern state, an indoor winter, a checkup that measures the heart and the cholesterol and never once measures the muscle. Or the vitamin that muscle depends on. So let us open up the mechanism, because once you understand it, you will never look at a stubborn jar lid the same way. Here is the one-sentence version. Your muscle cells carry receptors that respond to vitamin D, and when the vitamin is missing, muscle tissue loses part of the signaling it needs to maintain and repair itself. Now, the longer version. Vitamin D is not really behaving like a vitamin in your body. It behaves like a hormone. Your skin manufactures it from sunlight, you absorb some from food, and your liver and kidneys convert it into its active form. The National Institutes of Health, through its Medline Plus service, describes vitamin D's role plainly. It is needed not just for bone, but for nerve function, immune function, and muscle function. Muscle is on the label. It has been on the label for years, yet in most people's minds, and frankly in most quick appointments, vitamin D is still filed under bones only. Inside your muscle, the vitamin's active form docks with receptors in the muscle cells, and that docking influences how the tissue maintains itself, how it handles calcium signaling for contraction, and how it repairs. A 2023 systematic review in Nutrients, looking across animal models and human studies, reported strong associations between vitamin D and the size of skeletal muscle cells and the muscle's capacity to regenerate after damage. Read that again slowly. Not bone, muscle fiber size, muscle repair. Now run the film forward with the vitamin missing. Every day your muscles take microscopic damage from ordinary living, and every night your body runs repairs. With deficient vitamin D, the repair side of that ledger runs short season after season. The result is not a dramatic event. There is no chest pain equivalent for your thighs. The result is a slow, silent erosion that feels exactly like what everyone expects aging to feel like, which is precisely why it hides so well. And the aging body is set up for this trap 3 ways at once. Older skin synthesizes less vitamin D from the same sunlight. Older adults spend more time indoors, especially through northern winters, and appetite often shrinks, so dietary sources shrink with it. This is not a rare exotic failure. The CDC has considered vitamin D status in the American population important enough to formally track and report on at the national level, and the medical world itself is still actively working out how to handle this in older adults. A 2023 consensus statement in the journal Endocrine gathered experts specifically to address vitamin D in the older population, including its role in muscle health. Which brings us back to Margaret. 4 Michigan winters, aging skin, indoor days, a lighter appetite. Her muscle was not simply old. Part of it was undersupplied. The mechanism worked on her exactly the way the biochemistry says it should. She was not unusual. She was the design flaw in how we screen older adults, walking around in a cardigan. Now, I promised you this is a pattern and not one woman's bad luck, so let me show you the same mechanism wearing 3 different faces. Face number 1. Call him Walter, 74, retired postal supervisor in Tucson, Arizona. Walter is the case that destroys the most common objection, the one you may be thinking right now. I live somewhere sunny. This is not my problem. Walter lives under some of the most reliable sunshine in America. He also drives an air-conditioned car to an air-conditioned grocery store, walks his neighborhood at 7 in the evening when the heat breaks and the sun is nearly down, wears long sleeves and a wide hat on doctor's orders because of a skin cancer scare at 70, and is, at 74, working with skin that produces far less vitamin D than it did at 40, even in full sun. Sunshine over your city is not sunshine in your bloodstream. Walter noticed his golf drives shortening, then his rise from the low seat of his sedan turning into a 2-stage maneuver, hand on the doorframe, pause, push. He blamed Arizona summers and his knees. The sunny state resident who is quietly deficient is one of the most counterintuitive and most common versions of this story, and it is why the earlier open question, "How can this happen in a sunny place?" has a plain answer. The sun cannot help skin it never properly reaches, and older skin it reaches less effectively anyway. Face number 2. Call her Denise, 63, a school administrator outside Pittsburgh. Denise is the case that shows this is not only a problem of the very old. At 63, nobody was using the word sarcopenia around her, and that was exactly the problem. Because the label everyone reached for instead was her knees. Stairs got harder, so it must be the joints. Rising from low chairs got harder, so it must be arthritis. But notice the detail her family missed, and I want you not to miss. Her grip was fine. Her walking on flat ground was fine. And what failed was specifically the big movements, rising, climbing, lifting her carry-on into the overhead bin. Hold on to that detail. It is the clue I promised you at the start, and we are almost there. Face number 3. Call him Raymond, 77, a retired machinist in Cleveland living with heart failure. Raymond is the case that raises the stakes from inconvenience to survival. Because in people with serious heart conditions, muscle strength stops being a quality of life question and becomes a prognostic one. A 2023 study in the Journal of Cardiac Failure following a Singapore cohort of patients with advanced heart failure found that decline in hand grip strength was associated with increased death from all causes and with worse quality of life. Sit with that. In heart failure patients, the strength of the hand tracked with survival itself. And it is not only cardiac patients. A 2020 study in the journal Clinical Nutrition looked at 665 acutely ill older adults and used low hand grip strength as a rapid screen for sarcopenia, precisely because of what it forecasts about outcomes. And a 2022 analysis in Age and Aging covering 6,182 older adults examined grip strength and gait speed as predictors of mortality risk. 3 different journals, 3 different populations, one consistent message. The strength in your hands and the speed of your walk are not gym statistics. They are among the most honest vital signs you own. Walter, Denise, and Raymond are 3 different ages, 3 different climates, 3 different charts. Underneath, the same question was going unasked in all 3 exam rooms. So now let us make this practical. Here is exactly what to do in order starting this week. Step 1. Run the 3-part home check. Part 1 is the chair. Sit in a firm kitchen chair. Cross your arms over your chest so you cannot cheat with your hands, and stand up and sit down 5 times as quickly as you safely can, with someone nearby if your balance is uncertain. Notice the time and notice the effort. Researchers use versions of this because rising from a chair is a pure test of the large muscles of the hips and thighs. Part 2 is the grip. A new unopened jar, a full milk carton held out steady, a firm handshake with your spouse. You are not after a number, you are after a trend. Is this harder than it was 2 years ago? Grip strength is not a folksy measure. It is exactly what that clinical nutrition study used to screen 665 hospitalized older adults, and exactly what the Age and Aging analysis of over 6,000 people examined as a predictor of mortality. Part 3 is the hallway. Walk a stretch of your home at your normal pace while someone times you, and notice whether your normal pace has quietly become slower than the people around you. Gait speed sits alongside grip in that same mortality research. Now, one thing said plainly, this home check is a flashlight, not a diagnosis. It tells you whether there is something worth measuring properly. It does not tell you what or why. Step 2. Take what you found to your doctor and ask 2 specific questions. Question 1. Can we check my vitamin D level with a blood test? It is a routine, inexpensive draw, and Medline Plus, the National Institutes of Health's Health Information Service, describes deficiency testing as the standard way to know your status because you genuinely cannot feel your level. Question 2. Can we formally assess my muscle strength? Use the actual word sarcopenia. There are established clinical criteria for it. The European Working Group on Sarcopenia in Older People published its consensus definition in Age and Aging in 2010 and updated its approach in 2019, so your doctor has a recognized framework to work within. You are not asking for anything exotic. You are asking for 2 measurements that existing consensus documents already describe. Step 3. If your level comes back low, have the treatment conversation and have it with realistic expectations. Do not drive to the pharmacy and guess at a dose, because the right amount depends on how low you are, your kidneys, and your other medications, and that is your doctor's call, not a video's. What I can tell you is what the research tested. That 2023 meta-analysis in Nutrients examined patients who already had sarcopenia and evaluated supplementation with whey protein, leucine, and vitamin D together, measuring effects on muscle mass, strength, and physical function. Notice the shape of that intervention. Not vitamin D alone as a magic pill, but the vitamin restored alongside the raw material, protein, that muscle is actually built from. Step 4. Feed and load the muscle while the chemistry recovers. Correcting a deficiency reopens the repair pathway. It does not do the construction for you. Muscle that is asked to work safely and progressively rebuilds. Muscle that is protected from all effort keeps shrinking, regardless of any pill. For many older adults, that means simple resistance work, chair stands, step-ups, light weights, ideally shaped by a doctor or physical therapist who knows your heart and your joints. Step 5. While you rebuild, take falls off the table, because a fall during a weak season is how a reversible chapter becomes a permanent one. A 2014 systematic review in Minerva Medica on fall risk in the elderly identified vitamin D status as one of the well-studied risk factors, sitting alongside sarcopenia itself, polypharmacy, meaning the stack of 5, 6, 7 daily medications, and plain household hazards. So walk your home this week like an inspector. The loose bathroom rug, the dark hallway between bed and toilet, the extension cord across the den, and ask your pharmacist to review your medication list for anything that causes dizziness. The research community is still refining exactly how much fall protection supplementation itself provides. A 2024 network meta-analysis in BMC Geriatrics assessed vitamin D, calcium, and combined supplementation for fall prevention in older adults. And the honest summary is that scientists consider the question important enough to keep analyzing at the highest levels of evidence. Which is exactly why your defense should never be a capsule alone. It is the level corrected, the muscle fed, the muscle loaded, and the house made safe. Together. Now, the clue I have owed you since the first minute, the one that Margaret's family missed and Denise's doctors missed. Vitamin D-related muscle weakness has a signature. It tends to show up first and worst in the proximal muscles, the big muscle groups closest to your trunk, the hips, the thighs, the shoulders. That is why the earliest failures are rising from a chair without pushing off, climbing stairs without hauling on the railing, lifting a casserole dish to a high shelf, getting up off the floor. The 2008 review in Molecular Aspects of Medicine describes deficiency causing exactly this kind of myopathy, and it often arrives with a dull, aching quality in those same big muscles that people write off as rheumatism or just being tired. So watch your stairs, not just your hands. If your grip is holding steady, but chairs and stairs are failing on both sides of your body equally, that pattern is worth saying out loud in those words in your next appointment. My weakness is worst in my hips and thighs on both sides, and it aches. One sentence. It reframes the entire visit. Two caveats, and they matter. If your weakness is on one side only, or came on suddenly, that is a different conversation entirely, and it should happen with a doctor promptly, not with a video. And if your vitamin D level comes back normal, this clue does not apply to you, and your evaluation moves on to other causes, which is precisely what a proper workup is for. And that brings me to the mistake, the fifth thing I promised, the one that turns recoverable weakness into permanent loss. The mistake is resting your way into it. It sounds like wisdom. Stairs feel risky, so take the elevator. The garden is heavy work, so let it go. Walking is slower, so walk less. Every one of those choices feels protective, and every one of them accelerates the exact loss you are trying to avoid. Because muscle that is never asked to work has no reason to remain. Weakness leads to avoidance. Avoidance leads to more weakness, and somewhere in that quiet spiral, usually without a single dramatic event, the line gets crossed where independence does not come back. Margaret's side ramp at church was not a safety measure. It was a surrender note, written one small accommodation at a time for a condition that a blood test might have caught at 65. The tragedy in these stories is almost never the deficiency itself. It is the years of accepting decline as a verdict when it was, at least in part, a question nobody asked. So if you take one thing from the last 20 minutes, take this. Weakness after 60 is a finding, not a fate. Before you or anyone you love accepts the word sarcopenia as the whole story, two measurements deserve to exist: a vitamin D blood level and a real assessment of strength, grip, chair, and walking speed. The frameworks for both are already sitting in the published literature, from the European consensus definitions to the mortality data in Age and Aging to the mechanism work in Nutrients. The home check costs you a chair, a jar, and 10 minutes this week. The blood test costs you one sentence at your next appointment. And to be clear one final time, everything in this video is education, drawn from published research, and none of it replaces your own physician who knows your kidneys, your medications, and your history. Take the pattern I gave you into that room and ask the question out loud. If you have a parent, a spouse, or a neighbor who has started pushing off the armrests to stand, or who quietly stopped taking the stairs, send them this video before their next checkup, because the most useful thing they can carry into that appointment is the right question. And if this channel is helping you stay strong and stay independent, subscribe and tap the like button so these videos reach the next person who is still being told it is just aging. I will see you in the next one.